are live now. Hi guys, can you hear us? It's lovely to back here and see you also. People are joining in right now. Guys, let us know in the chat section if you can hear us and see us, and say
Hey
hi to
everyone.
Nikki. Okay, so yeah, great. People can hear us. So
Fantastic.
I hope everybody is pretty much excited for today's workshop.
Yay, I am too, actually. I'm curious, can everyone say hi and let me know where you are tuning in from? It is 9 a.m. I'm in Toronto, just north of the city. And yeah, I'd love to see where you guys are. Worldwide, I love this.
Yeah.
Manila, India, love it. Oh,
So a lot of
Finland.
Finland, Argentina. So a lot of people are joining in. That's great.
That's awesome. I'm excited.
So, hi guys, I'm your host for today's
Australia.
work.
Hey, Australia. Sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
I have
So,
family in Australia, so it has
yeah,
a special place for me.
so it's great. It feels great. So, hello guys, I am Nandini Singh, your host for today's workshop, and I'm so glad to be back here and see the excitement in you guys to for our this workshop. And we are so glad to have Nikki with us, as you've already most of you already follow her on Instagram. She's very popular and she's very good with her artwork. So yeah, lots of you follow her. So we saw a great response in the registrations as well. So I think we should just start the workshop.
For
And
sure.
before we start this workshop, I'm gonna give you a little introduction about Nikki. So as you all know, Nikki is a lettering artist and designer, and she has been featured in publications such as Where Women Create and Uppercases, Compendium of Craft and Creativity. She has been teaching others modern calligraphy, brush lettering, and modern watercolor painting through in-person workshops as well as online classes. So, it's her mission to teach to artists around the world. So let's hear it from Nikki. Please introduce yourself and let's start this workshop.
Thank you so much. First of all, thanks for having me be a part of your workshop. I think it's important for us to be able to learn, share, be inspired, and be inspiring as well. So I really hope this next hour together, I can impart some of my experience and even my application for when I sit down to do lettering, so that I can help you with any goals that you may be having and just have a really great creative and positively charged morning this morning. And for those of you who are now 9 p.m., whatever time it is in your part of the world. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. Just to tell you a little bit about myself. So I started Life-I Design in 2012. My mission really was to live an art-filled life where I could create art, share art, and make a living from my art. That wasn't something that I grew up around. I didn't have the influence of artists around me or even the idea of being able to be a self-sufficient and successful artist. So when I started Life-I Design, I took classes, I tried, I practiced, I wanted to find a flow and figure out who I was as an artist, but also as an entrepreneur. So now that I can look back, so it's been about 8 years, I guess, I'm able to now share more of what I've learned and even from my mistakes so that I can help others really apply themselves to their art, figure out what speaks to them and what brings them that joy, and then be able to apply it. So when I speak about art, I do it from a business side because that's who I am. But if you're here as a hobbyist, and maybe what you can do is let me know if you're a beginner letterer, what type of experience maybe you have, maybe even what your goal is, if you're a hobbyist or if you want to use it in your business, so that I can get an idea as I'm going through this workshop to be able to direct what I'm teaching you, okay? Just got a notification here. I'm gonna go ahead and dismiss. Yes, please follow me along at Life-I Design on Instagram. That would be fantastic. So when I speak of art, I do so from two different angles. So for me, the practice of art, especially in this time that we're all experiencing worldwide, it fills me up, it brings me joy, it allows me to focus on something that makes me happy. And then the end result is also so rewarding. So if you're coming at it from an idea that it's something that you would like to spend more time on and experience and explore, that's fantastic. But if art and lettering, I know I keep saying art, but lettering is art. So if lettering is something that you want to do more professionally, perhaps you want to design greeting cards or wall art, or you're creating logo designs for companies, this is also something that you can explore more of and grow your skills and your confidence and your experience with. Okay, so I'm just going to look at some of these. So lettering from professional book cover design. Ooh, that's exciting. You don't have major experience exploring a bit. Okay, so hey, New York City, London, oh my gosh, so many of my favorite cities. Bangladesh, Kosovo, wow, we really are worldwide. So when I was approached by Designhill to do this workshop, I was thinking about what I was sort of focusing on in the moment. And watercolor and watercolor lettering is something that I use in a lot of my design work. So I design things like stationery, tech products, home decor. I do work with manufacturers and companies who want things like t-shirts designed or logos designed. And one thing that I really love to do is be able to bring some texture and some interest and do so with my lettering using watercolor. I do have watercolor lettering classes and as well as painting classes. So I feel like, again, that's sort of where I'm being pulled towards. Dip pen calligraphy is my very first introduction to lettering and modern calligraphy specifically. It is something that I have, I hold very dear to me because I feel like it's a very tactile experience. So whether you're picking up a dip pen or a water brush or watercolor brush or even a paintbrush, these are all different forms of ways that we can express our lettering and create some really dynamic and interesting work for our designs. Okay, you're beginner too. Okay, fantastic. So is anyone able to paint along with me, or are you thinking about just watching? Because I'm going to talk about supplies and show you some of my favorites, if that's okay. Let's see, is
So that
anyone?
was a great introduction with so many of insights. So thank you for that,
My
and thank
pleasure.
you for your kind words as well. So, guys, I think yeah, there are mixed of people, mixed artists. Like some are beginners, some are at intermediate level. So yeah,
I'm
so
excited. There's a lot that are going to paint along. That's awesome.
yeah. So everybody, so we've already told them, like they will be needing these tools, basic tools. So yeah, now you can
Let's
go
talk
further
about
and
supplies.
yeah,
Yeah.
talk about the slides. Yeah, great.
Fantastic. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you our supplies. I have a sample of what I'm going to paint along with you, as well as I'm going to show you some different styles of lettering. So what I will be doing is I will be showing you a second camera where you can see my hands working, and I'll share you some of my favorite tips for using a paintbrush and watercolor. Sound good? Okay, so Canson XL watercolor paper for me is one of the more affordable types of paper. You can get it pretty much anywhere on Amazon. Again, I'm not sure where you are in your part of the world, what you have access to, but these are some things I want you to think about when you're buying paper, okay? Make sure you use watercolor paper. Make sure it's at least 140 pounds in weight, because the weight of the paper will allow you to add more water to it. Your paper won't buckle. You'll be able to even blend your watercolor. So weight is very important. I use a cold press. So the difference between, and I've got them cut down, the difference between a cold press and a hot press is a cold press will have a bit of texture. So when you're laying down your watercolor, the paper will grab it a little bit. It will start to even dry into the paper. Most papers are cotton based with a little bit of a coating. But if you use a hot press, which I'm not a huge fan of, I've used it in the past, it's a very smooth texture, the hot press is. So you'll find that your watercolor, or even if you're using a different medium, will just glide across it, and it won't give you that toothy texture to grip and to hold on to, okay? So I prefer cold press. You want to make sure it's at least 140 pounds or heavier. That means the thickness will be a little bit thicker, and that it's watercolor paper. So watercolor paper can tend to be a little bit more on the expensive side. So it may be a supply that you'll have to spend a little bit more money on, and you'll only be able to use it once. However, when I do some practices, I tend to use sort of the backside of a sheet that I was just practicing on, and I can reuse it for when I'm testing color or technique. But paper will be one thing that you'll be going through a lot of. And when you practice, you need to practice a lot. So try to save whatever money you have that you can spend towards your supplies and try to get as good a quality paper as you can. Okay, so for today's demo, I'm going to share with you a craft grade or a student grade watercolor paint because I'm all about accessibility. I don't want you to feel like you need to go out and buy a professional grade of watercolor or that you need to spend a lot of money on your watercolor paint. I will show you a little bit of both actually. I love the Winsor Newton, so it's Cotman. Let me get a different color to see if it'll come through. So it's the Cotman in tubes. Again, you can get these at most art supply stores as well as online. I like the pigment quality. It's considered more of a professional grade of watercolor paint. And it just blends really nicely. The color payoff is really nice as well. And you'll get a beautiful finish when your watercolor dries. Okay, so let's see, 140, yes, 140 pound is what I mentioned. So this is Daniel Smith watercolor. Not sure if you can see that really well. Let me bring it in for you. And I'll show you again when we start doing that hands-on demo. That one is also a good line. So again, if you're looking for a higher quality watercolor paint, you can definitely rely on the Winsor Newton. It's a brand that I really love. Watercolor cakes and tubes as well. Okay, so tubes are wet. They're like a creamy consistency. So when you are mixing your watercolor paint, you get a nice opaque pigment payoff. Then you can add more water to really dilute it and create that translucency. When you're working in a dry pan, so this is, again, this is the craft line. So it's by Prima. I really like that they're a bit more chalkier than regular watercolor. So when I'm doing lettering, I tend to scan my painting and then digitize. So my lettering may start off really small, but when I scan it, I can get crisp, beautiful, bright, bold color, but I can also expand it. So it can be printed on things like bedding or curtains or wall art because I do license my designs, okay? So I'm gonna show you, I prepped my palette, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I customized this palette. I probably bought 2 or 3 of these palettes from Prima. And then as you start to develop what colors you like, you can then mix and match. So I just took out the cubes and I customized this palette. So you can't get this specific one. It is an amalgamation of 3 palettes that I purchased. But you've probably even seen the palettes that are in a clear top that have, 12 to 24 colors. That's fine if you're just starting out and want to explore watercolor. And again, it's great for lettering. I've done commission design work with the more student grade palettes as well. It really is just a matter of you getting to know what tools you have on hand and being able to work with those tools. And that happens through practice and some of my techniques that I'm going to share with you during the live demo. Sound good? So let's see if there's any questions. So gouache, that's a good question. So gouache is a more opaque form of watercolor that you can layer. So a lot of illustrators will use gouache. I love gouache personally because you can actually layer the colors on top of one another. With watercolor, it's still possible to layer, but you need to start with the lightest color underneath and then build the darker colors on top. And I can demonstrate that again a little bit as we go, okay? Anything else about paint?
No, so I think we have covered, and let's start with the workshop now.
Yeah, okay, I'll talk about
Right,
brushes
guys?
as I start painting then. So be patient with me as I work to connect with my iPad. So I think what I have to do is go back to my email. And I'm clicking the little person. Actions. Okay, let me refresh and see if that works. So someone's asking, yeah, okay, good. So I have refreshed.
So those of you who are worrying about, watching it later, you will, of course, will get the recording of this whole session. So don't worry about it. And you can always ask questions in the questions tab. We'll be taking up questions in between the session whenever Nikki will get time.
Okay, so how do I go on stage with my iPad now? Here we go. No.
And
Can you
you,
see that I'm connected?
no, not yet.
Okay, so I can see the workshop on my iPad. Access webinar. I'm going to try this again. Okay, I can't see the camera on my webinar, unfortunately. Actions, enable screen sharing. Let's see if that helps. Allow, oh, I think it's working. Okay.
So you need to come on stage, I think.
Yeah, it's working. Give me 2 seconds.
Great.
Okay.
So I hope you all can see the screen, guys, right?
Can you mute
I
my
hope it's clear.
iPad, please, like we did yesterday? I'm getting that feedback
Back again. Perfect.
Yeah, great. Everybody can see it.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm working on my iPad, which is new. So be patient as we start, but you will be able to see everything. Okay, so I'm going to talk about brushes. That was the last thing on my supply list. What I want to do right now is show you how I created these 3 different styles with a single brush. Okay, so the brush I'm using is a 2/0. It is by Princeton and it's a round brush. Okay, when I do lettering, and I'll show you another example of that. This is a number 4. This is also a round brush. When you use a round brush, you're able to create these bold strokes as well as these really fine monoline strokes too. Everything that I wrote on this page has been done with the same brush. Okay, I'm going to show you how. So this is also an example of what I'll be working on to show you today. So I've already sketched out what I wanted to present to you to save time. When you're working on a lettering project, it's a really great idea just to grab a pencil, and you can even work out what it is that you want to sketch or what your quote is, you're saying. So for me, it was see beauty in every day. So you can even play around with how you choose to letter. So maybe I'll do beauty and bold and just really rough. You want to start warming up your muscle memory. And we'll do in over here, and we can even add in a little bit of fun there. And then every day we can scooch in. So when you start playing around with the letters and how they sit, together, you're able to get a feel for what type of ascenders you have, so the letters that are a bit taller, as well as what type of descenders, how you can add in a little bit of variety with your lettering too. So I'm not going to show you that in detail today because I want to be able to start painting to give you some techniques for when you're actually painting the lettering. Sound good? But always start with a sketch, and you can do several thumbnails to figure out again how you want to lay out your quote and how you can add some variety with the types of lettering. And maybe what I'll do is this is the one that I'm going to focus on because I really liked how that turned out. I'm going to keep that to the side so that you can see it as we begin the demo. Wish you could see my setup. I've got a stack of books in front of me. It's awesome. Okay, so when we start actually working with our brush, there are some things I want you to keep in mind. I got to get in camera. We're going to move that to the side. There we go. You want to make sure that you hold your brush at a 45-degree angle to my body. So I hope you can still see me. So I'm holding the brush, my arm is tucked in. Want to make sure that my forearm of my writing hand is able to move freely on the table. And you'll see that my non-dominant hand, so my left hand, is actually supporting my upper body, okay? That way your writing hand can move freely. I'm gonna try to angle this camera down a slight bit too. There we go. Your writing hand can move freely so that you can create some really nice thin, thick strokes and just flowy lettering, okay? So I'm going to use a palette that I have handy. So this is one that I mixed up with some Winsor Newton colors. I thought they were nice colors to use, bright and happy. Again, when you're looking at colors, think about what speaks to you, maybe what suits the project that you're working on. and mix a really nice liquidy. You can see my watercolor is in individual pellets or wells. You want to make sure there's movement to your watercolor, and you want there to be a lot of water, especially if you want to be able to mix your watercolors together, okay? So I'm loading up my brush. I have a lot of watercolor on that brush, and what we can do is just start practicing some thick downstrokes. So I'm applying a little bit of pressure and releasing, applying a little bit of pressure, really opening up that belly of the brush, releasing, and again for practice and warm up. This is something I do every time when I sit down to watercolor. Now, if you want to make an even bolder stroke, what you have to do is just apply more pressure, and I'm using the side of the brush. Okay, so it's not the tip. We want to angle and press and use the side of the brush. Okay, and you can see how beautiful. So I'm running out of paint and a little bit of water. The paper is absorbing that, creating some beautiful texture. Okay, so that's one thing you can do with watercolors, create some really nice texture. And as your paint starts to dry, you can see that I have heavier, more opaque spots and lighter, more transparent spots. Again, watercolor is the only medium that you can achieve that with. Okay, so the paintbrush size that I'm using right now, it's a 2/0. Okay, it's really tiny. So now with the same brush, with very little pressure, I can create some really nice thin upstrokes. If you work with modern calligraphy, you know that your upstrokes are always nice and thin, and your downstrokes are nice and thick. Okay, so I am going to write the word just hi, just so you can see how I'm working the brush. So you always take a break. So if I create that nice thick downstroke and thin upstroke, you always want to take a break and make sure that you release that brush and that you give yourself a chance to reset and create your second stroke. Okay, let me know if there's any questions as we paint. I'm happy to answer them as we go.
Yeah, so I think people are also, helping out each other with the brush size and everything. So it's great to see that.
Perfect. Okay, and I'm working small. So think of your brush relative to the size of the piece that you're working on. If I were to get one of my larger ones, I'll show you what this one looks like. This is a size 10. So that's quite large, and it doesn't suit the piece that I'm working on. So keep that in mind when you're picking up your brush. Think about how big your page is. I just took the large 9x12, the Canson that I showed you, and I cut them down into smaller pieces. Okay, so when you're working small, you want a brush that's a little bit smaller. I'm going to use water. I have a cloth handy as well that I can wipe my brush on, and I'm going to choose one of the lighter colors in the palette. So now if you want to create the fine monoline lettering, I'm holding my brush at a 90-degree angle. So that tip of my brush is pointing the ceiling. So this way exactly. And I want to make sure that I steady my hand and my arm on the table, support myself with my other hand, and let me get more paint. This might be a little bit too light. Yeah, it's too light for you guys to see on camera. I'll choose a darker one. And just holding it at a 90-degree angle, I can create some nice fine monoline lettering. So when you're thinking about lettering a quote, you want there to be some variety and some interest to your lettering. And you can always go over it. And if you want to make it a tiny bit thicker, just follow your strokes. And the beauty with watercolor, it will only go where the paint is wet. So if I wanted to, let's just do a little compound curve here. If I wanted to add a little bit more paint to that stroke, I can just very easily tap it in, and it creates some dimension. And the paint won't go anywhere other than where there was initially a wet stroke. So you can see I'm moving it around to let that paint flow. So that's the beauty of watercolor. You can always go back over it. And I'm going to let that dry so you can see the difference between an opaque stroke and a really nice thin transparent stroke. Okay.
It's a very great tip. Yeah.
Sound good? So now let's see how we can use our brush to create some modern calligraphy style lettering. So it's the same idea. I'm going to hold my brush more of a 45-degree angle outwards because I want to be able to create some nice thick downstrokes as well as when I release the pressure on the brush, so I'm lifting it off the page, I'm able to create a nice thin upstroke. Okay, so again, I'll show you that. It's a nice thick downstroke, and I'm going to release that pressure and just guide the very tip of the brush up across that page, and I can go in and fill in that stroke if I like. And because my stroke is still wet, if I wanted to create that dimension and add a little bit of more of a deeper hue there, I can do it while it's wet. And again, we'll go back to that to see what that looks like dry. Okay, I'm going to show you that one more time. Maybe we'll do the word, let's do the word modern. So again, I'm just thinking of modern calligraphy style, making sure that I release on the downstroke so I can reload my brush. And for those of you who have worked with modern calligraphy, you know that it is a nice slow process. We lift our brush after each stroke so that we can create some really nice expressive modern style calligraphy. Okay, and this takes practice. So if you're just starting out, you should be practicing a single stroke or a single letter over and over again. So you've probably heard the term muscle memory. Developing that muscle memory happens through practice only, not just watching me. So I'm glad that you are all joining me. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going back to areas of my letters where I think will be really beautiful with a little bit of depth by I'm just applying a little bit more watercolor paint to areas that are still wet to see how that looks like when it dries. Okay.
So some great tips are coming in, and even I'm finding it very interesting. So yeah,
It's relaxing, right?
Yeah, you guys are enjoying, and there's some very great tips that I can understand. So yeah, I'm gonna try my hands at watercoloring.
Awesome. You have to show me too. And
Yeah,
please
sure.
do, if you're inspired by today or painting along, if you're posting on Instagram, share with me. I love to see what you're doing because that inspires me to be able to teach more. And even if there are things that you're struggling with, then I can hone in on being able to teach that better. So I'm just going to see if there's any. Thank you. So nice. So the palette I'm using is just my Winsor Newton. I created my own color palette by mixing, and I can just reconstitute the watercolor by adding some more water. So that this palette is Winsor Newton, and this palette here is the Prima watercolor. Oh, it looks so messy on camera, but it's really not. But that means that I've practiced a lot. Okay, so are you ready to move on to maybe learning how to do some simple leaves with the same brush? Because we're going to add a little bit of leaf design to our lettering. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to switch palettes so you can see what the Prima looks like, and I'll use a bit of green. So the beautiful thing with using a round brush, I honestly have, I don't know, maybe 20 different sizes and manufacturer brushes of the round. What I love about it is that you can, again, create these really thin and thick strokes, but just by changing the pressure of the brush, you can, again, paint some really simple leaf designs. I can show you that in just a single stroke by applying pressure and releasing that pressure. If I were to create a stem, so it's the exact same brush, it's the 2/0. I just use a very thin stroke by applying a little bit of pressure, and I'm going to start at the top of my stem, and by increasing the pressure, I can open up the belly of that brush and create a really simple leaf design just by taking your time. And if I want, I can even add a little bit of water to my brush. So I just dipped it into my clean water, and I've diluted the watercolor because of that. And I can create some nice thin transparent brush strokes. So you can change what your leaves look like. So I'm just going to turn my page, and don't be afraid to turn your page when you're doing this, because then if you can work from the stem outwards, you're able to create that same stroke. Look how easy that was. What do you guys think?
I think it's perfect. It's looking perfect.
Okay, so
I mean,
again,
you
same
made
brush.
it look so easy. You made it look so easy.
Practice will make it be easy for others. But again,
Yeah.
it's just really controlling your tool. So understanding how your brush works I'll even grab another color. We can even mix a little bit of this. You guys can't see the palette. Let me move this for you. So what I'm doing now is I'm just mixing a little bit of this yellow. It's almost like a yellow ochre. And I'll mix it in with the green. Let's do it here so you can see that. So when you're working with dry watercolors, so all of this pigment here, I can reconstitute it by just adding a little bit of water. So see, and using the side of my brush. I want to protect the tip of the brush always. You don't want it to be damaged at all. And again, just with a little bit of pressure, we're going to paint out our stem, release. We're going to connect again, apply pressure to open up the barrel of the brush and create our leaf design. And if it doesn't look good the first time around, just go over it again, just like that. So again, I'm going to start here, apply the pressure, open it up, and let it come together. And then I can even change the color. So I wanted to add a little bit of this yellow. These leaves are taking on a different shape all on their own. And that happens. Go ahead and take up a little bit more of this yellow. So it got a bit creamy. So what I want to do is just open up the color or the pigment by adding a little bit of water to it so that it can flow better. Okay, I think you get the idea. So the beauty of watercolor is that you can mix colors together really easily to create some nice dynamic interest. So someone asked about where to put the darker shade. It really all depends. It's up to you. I was working on this piece just warming up this morning before we started, and I wanted to add a little bit of the darker shade more towards the bottom and the top here, so almost the beginning and the end of the letter. It really depends. I feel like with lettering, think about what the word means or the energy around the word too. So if you wanted to create something that's light and airy, maybe the top part of your lettering will be sort of more translucent, and then the lower part will be a little bit darker, so it looks like it's being uplifted. So have a think about when you start sketching where you want to highlight or create some drama to your lettering. Okay, hopefully that tip worked. Are we ready to start on our quote? Just checking the time, want to make sure that we do. Techniques for blending.
Yeah, we have half an hour. We have half an hour more, so yeah, we can continue.
Yeah, let's start working on the piece. So when you're blending colors on your piece, so I can see there's a little bit of a sort of wet spots there. I'll grab this yellow because I know that it's a nice bold color, and I'm just, again, creating that nice puddle. What you can do is just work right on the page where you're blending the two colors together and then follow your lettering line. And if you want them to blend seamlessly, you have to do it when both of your watercolor petals are still quite wet. Okay, so can you see that, how I blended it together? Okay, so working with watercolor, if you want to do wet on wet technique, you need to do it while it's wet. I'm going to show you that really quick because that's an important watercolor technique that I teach in my classes. I'm going to start with, I'll just do a stroke, making sure that this stroke is really wet, and we're just going to do a square. Okay, this is really good practice for learning watercolor. So many good tips for you guys today. Okay, so I'm just pushing that watercolor around, and with a wet brush and some of this green, which is a darker color, I'm just going to go ahead and start bringing it into that yellow. Hopefully you can see how that's bleeding into the yellow there. You can wipe off that brush and then blend them together so they start to bleed. So that's, again, how you can create some depth and interest. I can even go in and add a little bit more of that green, just so you can see how they start to blend together. Okay, so that's how you would blend watercolors together. And I used very extreme colors, but I wanted you to be able to see it on camera. You can even go through and start to blend them together. And you can even change that first color that I showed you there. Okay, okay, let's go to, okay, so good question. When I start my lettering quote, I don't normally use a pencil to outline it. That's because I like when things look hand done and less controlled, because I feel like that the hand done and hand lettered feel is very special. I don't want it to look too structured or computerized, depending again what my outcome is. So if you wanted to use a pencil to draw out what you're going to letter, please feel free, do that, because I feel like it's a really good guide. And I can even show you what that looks like. I'm just going to grab a pencil. So the quote that we are going to, or the version that we're going to use, let me see if I can put that in camera there. Maybe I can put my palette here. Okay, I'm going to hold it off to the side because then you won't be able to see me painting. Okay, so what we are going to do is work on the quote that says see. So we'll do it dark so you can see what that looks like. But I'm going to paint freehand because I enjoy seeing the imperfections. I want it to look like I hand lettered it versus digitized it. I don't want it to look like a computer did it. So I'm just changing the style of my lettering. So we've got the all uppercase, very bold, simple style, but then I'm bringing some interest here. And I'm going to let that cross over. Don't worry about crossing over letters. I actually like how that looks. And then I'll write just in simple lettering here in, oh, you can't see that. I'm sorry. Let me move this over. See if we can do that too. That's better. Okay. See beauty. And then every day is going to be more of a modern calligraphy style. That's cursive, but I really want beauty to stand out in this case. So again, when you're lettering quotes, think about what the message is and what is the more powerful word, and make sure you express that. I'll let it cross over. And again, with your pencil sketch, if you don't like the position, I can see I went very low here, but that's okay. That gives you an idea of what you can follow as you trace along. And then what I like to use is I have this, it's a kneadable eraser. It really removes just the pencil lines. So you want to make sure you have a guide, but with watercolor, you don't want those pencil lines to show through. So I'm going to erase beauty so you can see just a very faint outline of the word. With watercolor, because they are transparent, you'll see slight pencil lines if you're using a light color like yellow or even like creamy tones. So that's how light you should work with your pencil line. So I kept the other ones so you can see the difference. Okay, sound good? And you can go over it with watercolor. Yes, definitely. Okay, I'm glad that everyone's answering questions too. Thank you, everyone. What a great community. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with a fresh sheet. I might actually even work this way to see if I've got a bit more room to play around with. And we're just going to go for it. Sound good? I'm going to make sure you can see my palette. So I'm using this very pretty palette, and then we'll add in some more greens and make sure you can actually see my lettering most importantly. Okay, so again, using our 2/0 brush, I'm just going to go ahead and choose, we'll choose a lighter color because C isn't a dominant word. I'm going to use a darker color for beauty. So again, using my brush more at a 90-degree angle, I'm going to go ahead and just in uppercase, very simple form. With the S, I tend to letter it sort of in 2 strokes, only because of the curve. So I can make sure that's nice and bold. So I'm not following any calligraphy rules at all. This is just my own freestyle bold lettering. I think I maybe even, see, I'm just going over again and again, creating my lines. I think I probably even went over to the left too far. Again, if you feel like you need to draw these out more, please feel free. I am more of a free letterer, and this project is more for fun than anything. So sometimes you just want to enjoy the process and see what happens, because we often learn if there's something that we do that we don't like. We often learn from those even more so when things are successful. So I'm going to switch colors. I want more of a bold color. I can see that this petal needs a bit more water. And I'm going to go ahead and, for the word beauty, add a more bold tone. Okay, so beauty has a bit more power to it. I want it to be a bit more bold, so I'm using the side of my brush to create a nice bold stroke. And I want there to be a little bit of flow, but I call this sort of my own modern style of brush lettering, where it's a mix of flow and bounce and calligraphy, but it definitely has a bit of power on its own, or modern kind of flair. So I want that T to be even more bold, so I'll just go over it. And I like the little brush strokes that you can see where it's a bit jagged. Not sure if you can see that on camera. And then I always cross my T's, dot my I's sort of at the very end. So I can see that I've got a bit of room here. So I exaggerated that upstroke of my Y so that I can create a nice bold downstroke. So I'm just applying a bit more paint. I don't have a lot of water in that puddle, which is fine. So then what I can do now is I want to create a nice strong edge to that Y here. Bring that watercolor down so the color is nice and bold. And remember, I'm encouraging the watercolor to come down. It's still wet, so that watercolor won't go anywhere else on my page. And originally I had the T crossing underneath the C, so I'll just do that and just letting my hand glide and just do a really nice line there. Okay, look good so far? Oh, thank you. Shubi, if that's, hopefully I said your name right. Oh, thank you so much. That's so nice. Okay, so see beauty in every day is our last bit for the quote. So in is a connector word, so I don't have a lot of weight that I'm attaching to it. Oop, I got some blue in that puddle. I'm gonna ignore that blue. So I think what I'll do is use the same color that I used for C, and we'll just scooch it in right here. We're going to, in a very mono line, so I'm just using the tip of my brush, and I'm making sure that I'm supporting my upper body with my left hand so that I can draw in these, or paint in these really nice fine lines there. Okay, so see beauty in, and then every day I want it to be a little bit more like modern calligraphy, and it's going to fit in right there. And I think what we'll do is we'll use the same color as beauty. Actually, this top one here looks really nice. Let's change up the color. So I haven't added any dimension to the letters or haven't added anything yet. You could at this point, if you wanted to, go back in any areas that are still wet, you can add that depth. I personally like when the watercolor just dries naturally and you can see the texture in it. But if you wanted to add some bold colors at this point, you could drop it in wherever you see some wet lines in your lettering. Okay, so let's do a more modern style calligraphy lettering. And we're releasing on the upstroke. Remember, nice thick downstroke. And we'll release on the upstroke. And I like to exaggerate. So the V will be nice and exaggerated. We're going to make sure we have a tail to attach our E. Thick downstroke. Nice thin upstroke again. Needed a little bit, here we go, of watercolor. Okay, making sure that I can fill in a little bit of that space. So I could see I had room there. So the Y fit in nicely. And what I'll do, I lost my curve a little bit, is I'm just going to create a nice little tail there for the Y. And then day can kind of fall down lower. Let it loop. Create a nice tail. So when you have a nice long tail, you have room to attach your next letter. Fell short there, so I can draw it up. Downstroke. And then finish it off with my Y. And you can see how many times I redip. When you're lettering, especially when you're working with such a small brush, you'll need to reload that brush with your paint. Okay? What do you think? Looks good? Maybe what we can do right now is I'm going to take this darker color and I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of a shading to the top here where my letters are still dark or still wet while they're still wet. The thing is when you're talking and teaching, I don't have as much opportunity to go back while the letters are wet, but I want you to see what that looks like. These beginning letters here, it'd be nice if they were a little bit more wet so that color can bleed and blend naturally. And that's the beauty with watercolor when you're working with it. you've got opportunity for you just to explore by dropping in the watercolor and letting the watercolor travel and blend naturally. Okay, so you can see how I get a nice darker top and then it fades out to the bottom there.
It's
I'm
looking
glad
lovely. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. So now with the demo that I did more of a round design. I want you to see that where I created some leaves and some interest to accent my lettering. I also here is a little too close, but I was playing around with the idea of painting in stars or flourishes. You can really add whatever accents speaks to you. And the quote, I love leaves and nature and plants. So for me, it's just a very easy thing to draw and create some accent. But maybe what I can do is show you a few of those leaves and even some of the flourishes. Sound good? Let's change palettes too, so I can use some of the green from here. How are we for time? Okay, so 5 more minutes and then we can answer some questions. Sound good? Okay, so I'm going to grab
That
the
would be great. That would be great.
Okay, so now because this dry palette has been sitting for a while, the watercolor got really creamy. So you want to be careful when you're working with dry. I'm just going to grab some water, excuse me. What you want to make sure is that you're able to add more water to your palette so you can break up the watercolor so it's not a creamy consistency. If your watercolor looks very creamy, then that means you need to loosen it up by adding more water. Okay, so this green in here is a little bit too, it almost looks like, think of like hand lotion or face cream. You want it to be more of a looser, liquidy feel and texture. Okay, so maybe what we'll do is let's pop in a few leaves here. So make sure you can see that. So I'm just creating a nice thin stroke, going to apply pressure on my brush, release, and let that pressure go. I have a lot of paint on my brush, so I'm going to remove it. And again, just took out all the pigment. So just applying that pressure and releasing the pressure. Now my leaf has escaped me, and that will happen. I can just encourage that. And the beautiful thing is I can grab a little bit of that yellow, and I can even add a little bit of that yellow to the leaves as well, maybe even down here, and start to build some interest to accentuate my lettering. Okay. And to complement that, I'm going to turn my lettering around. Don't be afraid to turn your sheet around. Grab some more of that green. And then what I'll do is I'll think about accenting it by bringing your eye towards the bottom here by the Y and creating a few more leaves here. That will complement the ascender of the Y, but will also bring our attention to the bottom and complement what we did to the top. Here's some more of this yellow ochre tone. Okay, so when I flip it around, look how pleasing that is to the eye. Okay, so whatever you do to the top, try to make sure that it balances and flows. So when the viewer is looking at your piece, their eye isn't stagnant. So there is some movement and some interest in your piece there. Okay, any questions? Okay, so I'm going to grab, where did I put that palette? Right here. I'm going to grab some of the colors that we used in our lettering to create some accents as well. I really like this pinky tone here that I've got. Just looking at my piece that I practiced. Can you see that? I'll move it up a little bit. So I'm just using some colors that we use within our lettering, and they become almost a secondary accent. So they'll create some interest. Maybe I'll even bring it this way. But they'll be a little bit more subdued, so they don't stand out as much. You can play around with adding some interest there. So again, just turn your page around. Make sure you're always working in the same style of stroke. Even change the way that leaf looks there so that you can again start to add some interest to your piece there. Okay, and then really easily what you can do is bring in, maybe I'll use the green because I think that's nice. Bring in the green. I'm going to mix it up with my pink here a little bit and just create some interesting dots all around your piece. Again, just another form of interest that you can do very simply. So I wanted to demonstrate some ways that you can add some embellishment and interest to your piece as well. Okay, looking at the time. Okay, we've got 10 more minutes together. So that's it. What did you guys think?
So it looks fantastic to me. I mean, actually, I was reading all these reviews from these artists, and everybody is just loving the techniques that you are telling, and they're just loving your teaching process, the way you made it so easy, like I said in the beginning. So yeah, it's I think everybody's enjoying it, and they have some questions also.
Fantastic. Thank you. I pride myself in being able to teach so that a beginner can understand, and then you can go back and practice it, and hopefully that it's sunken in. So thank you. Thank you for that.
So, guys, we are very glad, and make sure that you try this out if you're not trying it right now, and share the outcome with us on Instagram, tagging us in your stories and feed wherever you find it, perfect. So just share it with us, tag us, and we'll have a look. So let's move on to some questions. Let's take up some questions. We have questions related to digitalizing the artwork.
Okay.
Some of the questions. So I think let me just see one question.
Oh, here we go. Can you give us suggestions on how we can digitize these? Okay.
Yeah.
I can talk to you about my process. When you scan and digitize your artwork, that itself is a skill. Okay, so think of it that way. When I digitize, I scan the artwork into, let's minimize this. I scan the artwork into, or using a scanner that I have. It's a Pro. I don't have the name and I don't have it handy with me. But I can type that in maybe after the workshop so that we've got it in the recording. But it is a scanner that I can use to scan and take almost a photograph of the image at 600 DPI, which is a really nice big size file. And I bring that artwork into Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop, and then I start to work with brightening it, removing the background, making sure that it's nice and clean, and saving it as a PNG file that I can either use when I work in Photoshop or in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so when you start to digitize and scan your pieces, you have to then learn how to use technology to create that digital piece. But the beauty is when you are able to digitize, you can change the color, you can take out portions of your piece, you can move them around and create patterns from them. A whole new world opens up in terms of how you can create art and even then make money from your art. Digitizing is something that I recommend to everyone if this is something that you want to do as for a living. Okay, so
So
it is the process.
yeah, so it's like you can explore various sections of it after you get it digitized. So, and before we move forward, I really want to thank you for taking up this session because it was really quick, it was really insightful, and it has great techniques and tips that you shared. Everybody just loved it. The teaching style was very good. So yeah, I'm pretty much excited, and everybody else also is. So Yana has one question. Any tips on balancing the flourishes around the artwork?
So I think it depends on your own personal taste and style. And again, what's your end project? So when I add in flourishes, I personally like more bold, strong lettering. When I add a bit of flourish, it's to make sure that my ascenders fill in the space. So you can see here, and we'll use this one. So my ascenders can fill in the space and there's a bit of movement to my piece. It really depends on what your project is. If I were to do wedding calligraphy, then I would have a lot of flourishes because wedding calligraphy tends to, or weddings in general, tend to be a little bit more elegant and traditional. So you want to add some flourishing to make it more beautiful and feel more formal. So it really depends on what your project is, what you want the feel of the lettering to say, and you want to make sure that you suit that project. When I do logo designs, for instance, I want it to be interesting to the eye. So I may do what I did here in Everyday, just add a little bit of movement, but mostly I want it to have strength and I want the logo to look bold. So again, it really depends on what your end goal is. Okay, hopefully that helped.
Shubhi has one question. What GSM of paper is suitable for watercolor lettering and blending?
I would do at least 140. There are some lower ones if you want to practice on, like maybe 90. But I would do, I'm going to grab the Canson watercolor pad if I can see it. I wish you could see my desk. There's so much around, which is awesome. Okay, so this Canson one is 140 pound, so 300 grams. I don't know if that helps. Yeah, and cold press, like I mentioned, has a fine grain, so the texture is very fine. There's other watercolors. So this one, for instance, where I have our practice, my little sketches. So these watercolor bits are what I consider sketches because I'm working on ideas. So this is a Strathmore and has a little bit more texture to it, and it feels like it's more cottony, so it's going to absorb the water a little bit more. It's acid free. It is watercolor, 140 pounds and 300 grams. Okay, hopefully that helps. Cold press as well.
Great, thanks. So, moving ahead, I have like two more questions. We have 5 minutes, and I wish this could be a long session because it was great to have you on with us today.
Thank
So,
you.
I've seen your work, and all these artists follow you, and they ask for your suggestions and everything. So, where does the inspiration comes to you? How do you get inspired to think of such great ideas and such visuals?
So I tend to use Pinterest a lot for gathering ideas like color palettes and styles of lettering, especially typography, because I feel like there is just such an amazing amount of inspiration on Pinterest. So I really have boards that I have that are public for other artists to then look at and to use to reference. And then I have some private boards where I want to hone in on a few more ideas because I tend to gather a lot of information. I love looking at magazines and books. I actually have old antique, they're almost like lettering guides and publications that I use to see what type of flourishes they use or embellishments. And then I gather that information together and grab my sketchbook. Okay, so whether I'm looking for quotes or styles, bring all of that information together. You can even print some images offline. And then once you have an idea, it starts to create a mood for what your project is. And then you can start sketching different thumbnails. So if you break out your page, maybe have 10 boxes where you can think about different embellishments that you want to add. You can practice with your pencil, different styles as well. And that's when your project starts to form. But then I also do sketches using my watercolor. So a sketch isn't only just a sketchbook and pencil. You can actually start physically sketching while painting. Okay, so it's just gathering whatever speaks to you. Nature, I've brought leaves in from outside to look at the structure of the leaf, how, especially in the fall, if you're able where you live to experience a fall season, it's my favorite season. I love to see how a leaf changes, what the colors look like, and then bring that into my planning process as well. So whatever speaks to you, I always say with art, it's what makes you feel good, what makes you feel happy, what brings in that joy. Bring that into your planning and to your artwork as well. And then you'll enjoy the process with whatever happens.
So that's a very great insight, and people are really grateful to you. Like they are praising this session. So we are also very much glad that we had this session today. So thank you so much for taking out the
Thank
time
you.
for
Thank you.
doing
Thanks
this.
for approaching me. Well, if you
So
want to
you
continue to learn with me, I do have classes on Skillshare. I teach classes on my own platform. There's lots of lettering and watercolor. And what you see today is my style of teaching. So very approachable. I break it down in bite-sized pieces so that you can start painting right away or drawing letters right away and having that success. So that inspires you to continue. So yeah, I've got
so I
YouTube
think
channel too with lots of tutorials. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I think I'm totally gonna agree with you on these points. Like the way you explain things, it's very easy for beginners as well to grab the process. How to draw, how to hold the brush, because it really helps. So, guys, of course, as we shared her Instagram and her design bundles that you can check out on our website, so go follow her. And in case you have any questions, you are open to DM her, I'm sure, and go attend her classes. I think Skillshare is also free for 2 months, and we all are mostly in our homes. So yeah, of course, we can use this opportunity and attend Nikki's classes. So before ending this session, I have one question from you. It's basically an advice. The one advice for any artist that you would suggest, that would stuck to throughout your artistic career. So any advice that you wanna give to people who are attending this session or who are watching this session later on YouTube?
There's so much that I can share, but I think the big things are it's good to watch these sessions, and there's so much content that we can consume online, but to apply what you learn is the most important thing. So the more you can practice, build that muscle memory, even create pieces that you don't like, that's where I feel like I grow as an artist the most. So make art, even if it's bad, even if it's good, share it so that you can get some feedback and continue to figure out who you are as an artist, and know that there is so much opportunity to create art as a hobbyist, but also to make money and to really support your love for art. I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't have that opportunity, but in the day and age that we're in, like, look at, we're worldwide. How many countries are we connected to right now with this sharing art? There is so much opportunity. So practice it, learn, practice it, do it, and share it. And good luck. And please stay connected with me so I can see what you're doing.
So that's a great piece of advice, and you filled us with such great energy, Nikki. So thank you so much, and I'm sure like you said, we are connected globally through social media and through all these community. So guys, and of course, we this is an opportunity where we can collaborate with artists, related to us in the same niche. We can always collab more and reach out to more people and get more clients. So yeah, all the very best for all of you. You guys have been great. You guys have been very patient throughout the process, and it's great that you enjoyed this session today, and thank you so much, Nikki, for providing such valuable insights. Thanks a
My
lot, guys,
pleasure.
and we hope to get do another session in future with Nikki and collaborate more. So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram.
Yes. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you. Bye bye, Nikki, take
Bye-bye.
care.
Thank you. You too.